Have you ever seen a before and after of smokers' lungs? Maybe when they were smoking, the lungs look dark, black, they're scarred, and then after a certain amount of time, without that toxicity, without that stressor, those lungs begin to heal and look very different. That scenario of innate healing isn't exclusive to just a smoker who stops. That is possible when any stressor is removed from our bodies for it to be able to heal innately. It might just take some patience, and it might not happen in the way or in the order that we would like it to. Today's story is about Michael, whose lungs were very scarred. He was headed towards surgery, and what happened when a specific kind of stressor was removed from his life. I'm Jenna Quinton, founder of Adjust Your Media and host of What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate podcast. And I'm excited for today's episode because not only do we hear Michael's story, but we also talk about what holds us back from sharing chiropractic stories. We have these things happening around the world in chiropractic offices, and what can we do to move beyond those objections, those barriers, so that we can share more of these stories and really connect with more people and tell them what chiropractic is even about. I will also tell you that if you are fired up and excited, then you should go to the show notes because there is lots of tools for how we can support you and help you to share your stories and do it more effectively. Today on What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate podcast is Dr. Angus Pike. He kind of time traveled from Australia to be here because it's already tomorrow for him, but he is a chiropractor, a podcaster, marketer, and coach. He loves to help natural health practitioners get more attention, have more impact, and attract more patients with digital marketing. And I appreciate he has a very heart-centered approach, which I really resonate with. So welcome, Dr. Angus.
Hey, Jenna, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure. So I'm very excited. And it is tomorrow for me. And I can tell you that it's the next 24 hours is all great. You're going to love it. Okay. I've been there. It's amazing. So get excited.
Oh, I love it. Wonderful. It's already Friday. That's good.
Yes.
All right. Well, as always, tell us about somebody whose life improved with chiropractic.
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about this in the week leading up, and I want to tell you about Michael. And Michael's a taxi driver. I think you might call them cabs over in the state. And so he had a life where he sat down a lot. And so we drive on the right-hand side of the car here. And if you can't imagine, Michael would spend his whole day in the car with his window kind of wound down, and he would lean over to the right-hand side. And so I remember looking at his x-ray, and his x-ray looked exactly like that. So when we got to the kind of mid-thoracic spine, it just took this kind of veer off to the right-hand side there. Now, Michael came in to see me. His daughter and kids were all patients of mine. They were grown up and they loved chiropractic. And Michael was scheduled for some surgery in his lungs. So the right-hand lung of his had developed some scar tissue in it. He'd had repeated lung issues, infections, pneumonia, a lot of breathing issues in the decade prior to me. And the bottom part of his right lung was full of scar tissue and scheduled to be removed. And he came in to me to see whether or not chiropractic could help. And so we checked his spine, I checked his posture, I noticed what I just explained to you before, we grabbed some x-rays. And then we talked a little bit about chiropractic, and we said, look, it's the brain and the nervous system is what controls and coordinates the body. And if there's tension and interference throughout that system, it impacts the body's ability to be able to heal and repair. And who knows what that might look like, but let's just get you checked and let's start to get you adjusted. And so Michael was scheduled for surgery in about 4 or 5 months from when he started to come in and see me here. And I remember his first re-x-ray, so about 12 weeks after he came in to see me, and the changes were marked. And he'd noticed in that time as well that his breathing had improved. There had been less kind of chest infections over that time there, but had decided still to go ahead with the surgery. He thought it was probably a good idea because of the damage at the bottom of the lung there. It was constantly giving him breathing issues, although they'd improved. Part of the pre-op process, 24 hours beforehand, I remember seeing Michael kind of at the end of the week on the Thursday, and he said, Friday, tomorrow is pre-op and Saturday is going to be the surgery. And I'm like, good luck, buddy. Can't wait to see you when you get back in again, and all those kind of things there too. So 10 days later, when I saw Michael again afterwards, it was, how did the surgery go? He goes, I didn't have the surgery. I go, well, what do you mean you didn't have the surgery? He goes, pre-op, we went in for pre-op x-rays. They ran the x-rays again. And I remember being wheeled out of the x-ray place and then being wheeled back into the x-rays. Like, what's going on? So, well, the doctor wants to get the x-rays again. There's some problems with the first one. So goes in, gets the x-rays again, comes back out there. Doctor comes out to him again, Michael, we're not doing the surgery. He goes, what do you mean we're not doing the surgery? He goes, there's no problem with the lung. He says that scar tissue is all healed. Everything is fantastic. There's nothing for us to operate. On your way. And so that was a pretty wild story that I just remember the changes in Michael in terms of, a nasty, damaged, scar tissue, constantly infected lung. And that given the opportunity for the body to heal and repair, the body just went to work and did that. So that was the story that kind of popped into my mind, Jenna. So
I
of an
love
incredible
that.
story. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's because Michael was one of my earlier stories in chiropractic, and as I was thinking about it this week leading up to it too, one of the challenges is that I'm 25 years a chiropractor now, and sometimes we start to take these things for granted. It's like
Mm.
and it's a kind of cool thing. Like, hey, of course, like the body healed and repaired itself, but it's remarkable, and it irreversibly changed the direction of Michael's life. He then started to, and he was living an incredibly vitalistic lifestyle, changed the way that he ate, changed the way he managed his stress, he changed the books that he started to read.
Mm.
All of those things kind of changed in a remarkable way. I happened to run into Michael about 12 months ago. I happened to see him at the hospital. I was in visiting my mum, and his mum had just passed, and it was nice to see him. He'd moved away. It was nice to see him and give him a big hug and see how healthy and happy and well that he continues to be all these years afterwards as well. So, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
brief little story there.
I love that. There's so many key elements there as well for people to understand. I love that you drew the connection between what he did daily, the repeated postures, the repeated patterns, and you drew that connection to how his body was responding and how his body was no longer able to adapt to that repetition.
100%. The tension and the compression that exists through his entire chest wall because of his posture and because of his sitting must have been having a huge impact on his nervous system. And it's hard to know. I'm not necessarily a believer that if you have a T6 to T8 subluxation, that's lungs. I don't think the body works that way. I think that when we have a subluxation, it's global. So it affects everywhere. And so, we worked on his entire posture. But there were, the tension through his thoracic spine was, I can still remember it now. That posture that we saw that matched the posture that he sat in for hours each and every day there
Yes.
too. And it's not a surprise that that was one of his major symptoms that he presented with.
Yeah, I think people understand so much with carpal tunnel and they think about, oh, yes, okay, that is a micro trauma that has occurred over time. But then for them to understand that that is possible in other places, that repeated stress, even if we think about in water and sand wearing, it's not one wave necessarily. It could be one wave that's
Yeah.
destructive, obviously,
Yep.
but it is all of the little waves happening that starts eroding the beach, eroding the rock. And it is all of those little things in our spine and in our nervous system as well.
I think one of the key messages that I wanted our practice members to understand is the impact of repeated stress over time that it has. There's no doubt that the longer that we have subluxation, the greater the impact that it has on our health and well-being. And the faster that we can start to remove that subluxation, then the more the body has an opportunity for it to express health at its best level, whatever that looks like. And sometimes that happens really quite quickly, like Michael, when you think about it, that was, forgive me for the times, but it was certainly, inside of 6 months that happened, and possibly closer to 4 months. It was certainly after his first re-x-ray, and so that happens at 12 weeks. So, that's remarkably quick, and sometimes as chiropractors, we don't have control in which the order that the body heals and repairs itself. And often it
Right.
doesn't go in the order that we and or the patient wants also. And so we need to be patient and understand that there is an intelligence inside the body that does understand the order. And it just so happened that that order kind of to match in with what Michael wanted also. But you're right, this was a lifetime of tension that built up on Michael's nerve system that resulted in, a lung that wasn't able to repair itself.
Yes. This is fascinating speaking about lungs because there is a study that I will link that talks about posture affecting lung function in a
Oh,
certain degree of maybe it was 15 young men who were otherwise healthy. So I will link that because that's fascinating. But I also think about the times when someone has ever seen photos of like before and after with someone who's a heavy smoker and how quickly the lungs start to heal when that
yes.
stressor is removed. And I think that that's just another point of showing that the lungs are able to heal And if the stress is a subluxation that's removed, or if it is smoke inhalation that is removed, like you said, the body is intelligent and it wants to heal.
Its natural state is one of vitality. I think that we think, and there's a tendency for us to think about health as, we often put that word optimal in there, but we don't think about that as natural. That's the natural state it's designed to be in all the time, is for us to be incredibly vital and healthy and energetic there too. And we just do a lot of things that get in the way and rob us of that too. So again, my favourite sayings to discuss with practice members is that the body needs no help, it just needs no interference. So we're going to work at getting rid of interference. My job as a chiropractor is to get rid of the interference that happens in your spine and nervous system, and I'm going to coach and support you to do the same with the way that you think and the way that you sleep and the way that the foods that you put in your body, because there's interferences that come through all of those things also, toxicities, deficiencies that we get through those. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious because I think here in the US, I am seeing more people really searching for this information. It feels like the world is primed for chiropractors to come center stage with this message. I see, even on social media, I see mental health experts talking about nervous system regulation all of the time. But in what you do, what do you see is holding chiropractors back from sharing their own stories that are happening in their practices?
I think there are a couple of things that happen. So, for instance, here in Australia, we have some regulatory issues that prevent us. So we can't share any form of testimony here in Australia. And so that would be one that would stop us from doing that.
Yes.
Whilst we can share them inside our practice, from an external marketing point of view, we can't share them. But, I also work with a lot of chiropractors from around the globe where they can do it. I think what gets in the way of us sharing this, anytime we need to go and put ourselves out there, so to speak, we start to make it more about us than about the people, and we worry, what will people think? What if a lot of people watch this, and then what will that mean? And what if nobody watches it, and what will that mean? People seem obsessed about, what if I get haters on there? And I'm like, I've been sharing a message for a long time. I'm not saying they don't exist, but they're few and far between, and they're pretty easy to ignore if that's the case. And occasionally you get a pest and you just kind of move on from that too. So I think, Jenna, the biggest barrier is really us. I used to think in the early days, Jenna, it was a technical issue. People wanted to know, how would I structure that message? And so I taught them how to structure a message. Like, there is a way that a story should be told. And then it's like, okay, what is the technology that I need? I'm like, okay, well, here's the camera side of thing. And the answer to the camera thing is just use your iPhone.
Yeah.
And then it's like, how do I post it? Well, that's not all that complex. So we can answer the technical questions, and people still didn't share it. And so really the problem for most of us is getting over ourselves in order to share it. And we come up with lots of different excuses like that. I'm an introvert. I don't do those things. I don't like social media, all that type of stuff there too. And I'm like, well, do you like new patients? Do you like helping people? Do you like building a practice? Because if you like doing all of it, again, the answer is, like, none of this has anything to do with you. And that's the big problem that you're having, is that you're making it about you. And instead we need to get you out of the way. And I want to remind you that in your community, there are literally thousands of people that are begging for a solution, and I just don't know that you're the answer. It's not that they're saying, I don't want to see a chiropractor. It's that they've got a little one that's having learning difficulties and they don't know that you can help. It's they've got a breathing problem, they don't know that you can help. And maybe they've got a musculoskeletal issue and they've been told that chiropractor's a quack and you can't help as well. And so I still really believe that chiropractors are their community's best kept secrets. And I used to see that. I was chatting with a client during the week. For the last 10 years, we were very focused with our external marketing. We did a lot of it in different ways, community events, and all those sorts of things there. And yet still on a weekly basis, 25 years in the same practice or 22 years in the same practice, 10 years of being very visible with our marketing. And most weeks we would have somebody come in, Jenna, and people go, I didn't even know you were here. And so it's a visibility issue, all those type of things there too. And so I think we need to get out of our own way and start to share the message, from that point of view. So the biggest barrier holding us back is really us.
I absolutely agree. And even like you said, with haters or negative comments, I see so many times they're the silliest things. Like, of all the things that you could criticize me on, you picked a really silly one. And that makes it so easy to just say, you can just block them. You can just, carry on with your life. You don't even have to respond at all. But it is the things of, even energetically, I have told people before, do your videos on a day that you just feel amazing. Whatever it is, if you have just done yoga, just gone on a walk, you did your morning meditation or prayers or breath work or all of it, where you feel so centered in your best self. And then
Mm,
it almost doesn't matter what you create from that space. It is going to find somebody that resonates with it. You just have to push play. You just have to click send. You just have to click post. And I find that for myself, even that when I am out of my own way and I am centered, like you said, on the person on the other side of the screen, it all does flow a little bit. And I appreciate too, you talked about how to structure a message and the tech and things. And those are all things that we can learn and file away. And then I really believe our brains are neuroplastic enough to find that information when we need it. And when we're in that great state of creating, we won't have to logically think about it as much.
mm,
We'll just
mm,
do the things that we've learned. So I love both ways of creating, of being really logical about it. And in fiction writers used to call it flying by the seat of your pants. Where you don't
mhm.
have an outline, you don't have a strategy, you don't have a structure, you just fly by the seat of your pants. And I think that that's possible when we know our message. Like you said, we know who we're creating it for so much, and we're thinking of them, and we have all the tools, we have all of the tech all set up. We don't have to think about it anymore. And then we just go.
100%. I think the ingredient that we need to bring more into our communication, particularly our marketing message there too, is authenticity.
Mm.
So, and that's really great news for our listeners. So there is an audience for everyone. So this means that I don't have to show up like Jenna. I don't have to show up like Angus. I don't have to show up like, the amazing Tony Ebel or lots of these fabulous guests that you
Yeah.
have. Is there's an audience for everybody. And when I'm teaching on this, one of the things I like to show is I get a list up of the top 10 selling albums of all time. And number one is Michael Jackson. Number two is AC/DC. Number three is Fleetwood Mac. Number four is Pink Floyd. And there's nothing in common with those. The sort
Yeah.
of music type of band, that type of stuff, but there's authenticity amongst them. And so
Mm.
what we need to work at developing is being ourselves, sharing from the heart. And it's what's missing because as individuals, we have really very sophisticated authenticity radars. It builds trust. And so it's not about you delivering a message that's word perfect because we fumble in words all the time. It's not about it being filmed in phenomenal 4K with fancy cameras and sound and stuff like that, because sometimes that can erode a bit of trust as well. Sometimes it can look too polished. But when we can access, maybe it's your heart, maybe it's your gut, maybe whatever it is for you there too, and we can just share that message authentically. And the interesting thing is it does take time for many of us to find that authentic voice. It takes repetition for us to kind of peel away those layers and do that too. And if we do that, that's the message there that was much more likely for it to connect and land and have the impact that you want it to have.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what you said with your chiropractic patients and having patience in waiting for the body to heal, trusting the innate intelligence to be able to do its thing. I think in chiropractic, sometimes we know that about the body, but then we're talking about an ecosystem of marketing, of relationship building, and realizing it takes patience there too. So when you're coaching, when you're working with clients, what do you tell them about realistic expectations with what they're doing? I know some people are like, oh, I don't want to, like, they want a viral video, but they don't. They don't want to
Yeah.
be a TikTok chiropractor. But then if
Mm,
things aren't going viral, they're like, oh, well, this is a failure. I'm going to stop. So how do
yeah.
you coach people through that patience aspect?
So at our practice, we've had several videos get in excess of 1 million views, and none of them bring in patients.
Mm.
So if we think about our local community where our practice is, and we use it's a community of a little over 15,000 people. So like we're a local business, a service-based local business. So it's not about us trying to get millions of views at all, because you can go in and have a look at where these people are coming from, the millions of views, and they're from all around the world. And
Yeah.
we're a great chiropractic practice, but someone's not going to hop on a plane from one side of the world to the others to come and see us. That's just the fact there too. The first thing I want to let people know, again, to go back on this, what I was talking about before in terms of it's not about you, it's about the person. We used to run a weekly workshop, okay, every week on Tuesday night at 7:15, and we called it our spinal care class, which is a bad name for it, and I would rebrand it now if I was doing it again there too. But some weeks I would have 2 people there. Most weeks I would have 5 or 6 there too. And these were our new practice members that were coming in there too. And I was really happy to sit down with 5 people for 30 to 45 minutes and share the chiropractic story with them. And so now when somebody has a video and they tell me there was only 20 people watched it, I'm like, that's 20 people. Like, I want you to imagine sitting in your practice and there are 20 people in front of you and they just heard a chiropractic message. And for most people, it's not 20, it's 100. You know, do you know how many people like 100 is? Like, it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we become a bit numb to that. The goal, first of all, is not to get a viral video at all. Depending on the size of your community and depending on where you're going there too, most of your videos with the right strategy are going to be getting somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 views. Like, that's it. And that is amazing. Like, just 20 years ago, for you to be able to put a message in front of, 1,000 or 2,000 people in your community, because we can target it like that and have them to listen to it, it cost a lot of money. Like,
Right.
that was nothing that you could do for free. Maybe you got publicity from the local, but for you to be able to do that. So we need to kind of reset our expectations in terms of, one, the goal is not for us to go viral. The numbers you see in front of you are real people. And what we're doing is we're drip feeding these people. So, Google will tell us that, they have this concept of 7, 11, and 4. It says, this is the time that it takes for us to build trust, or what they call a zero moment of truth. And they talk about 7 hours of content. Now, there's different numbers out there, because I've heard as little as 47 and as much as 7. But the answer probably is, Jenna, it's more than what people are putting out there now.
Right.
So, it needs to happen over 11 different time slots. So it's not, even if it's at 47 minutes, that 47 minutes is not best consumed in one hit. I want it to be over 11 different hits there too. And I want it to be in 4 locations too. So this is the other thing. So I might hop on, Jenna, and watch some of your practice videos and go, that's fantastic. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over and check out your website. And then the website's amazing through there too. So then I'm like, oh, I'm going to have a look at your Google reviews. And so there's 3 different locations that what I've done is I've gone and, I've stalked you, for lack of a better term, there too. And that relationship deepens the more the locations are happening there too. And so we do need to be patient. There's some forms of marketing that are very quick. If I do a corporate talk, then I go and I speak to, 6 to 30 people there too. At the end of that, if I do a good job, I can expect that somewhere between 25 and 50% of those will make an appointment. Okay, so that happens within that 45 minutes. If I do a spinal screening, that day I get those results. Social media is not that for most of us, unless we're running very targeted ads. If we have an organic strategy that's about branding and building that too, what we're doing is we're creating a tsunami, like a tidal wave. But once that tidal wave comes, a friend of mine, Cody Hainish, who has done incredibly well on TikTok and Instagram, he ends up with somewhere between 10 and 15 new patients a week from his organic social media. So it happens when we're patient and when we do a good job with it.
I love that. Absolutely. And I love what you said about the different touch points. I've told people it's an octopus approach. Do you have 8 different tentacles in different places that are all feeding back to, or do you have all of these little peripheral nerves that feed back to the spinal cord, which is a platform that you own, so
Great
that you
point.
can get those reactivated patients, those new patients, the referrals, the reviews. And I say the referrals and reviews and new patients are kind of like the brain. And if that's all you want, you can just want that. But a brain in a jar isn't alive. And I would rather have a whole human system with the little peripheral nerves of our silly little social media memes that make us all laugh, and that somebody shares with their sister, who that makes another touch point, like you said, where she's like, oh, is it that chiropractor that you told me about? Like, that meme is funny, or that
Yeah.
video is interesting. Or, oh, now here's a blog post where they put all of the information that you can skim through. And it is all of those things. And sometimes it's very tricky to trace back where did that journey start, but it's a beautiful thing to see where it ends.
Wonderful. Attribution and what each of us are wanting, and I can understand the fantasy behind it, is that I did this and I got that result.
Yes.
And it's just not how we work nowadays. When there was less forms of media, when there was a newspaper, and it was easier. But nowadays, when you think about the last time that you went to make a serious buying decision, whether it's a car, a house, and health is one of those things, we're going to look at multiple places. And this even happens, Jenna, if you say to me, you've got to go and see my chiropractor, Angus. She's amazing. I'm going to go, great. I'm probably going to have a look at her website. I'm going to have a look at her reviews and have a look at her socials. And so we wrongly think that when I put down on the how did you hear about us, and I go, Jenna, we think this is
Yes.
an internal referral, but it's not just an internal referral, because your Google reviews, all of those things help to build the relationship and the trust, so that when I end up with your wonderful chiropractor there too, those marketing, assets have done a lot of the heavy lifting for us.
Absolutely. I tell people it's a plate glass window into your office. All of those pictures, all of those videos lets people window shop. And like you said, if there were 200 people on your sidewalk looking in and seeing what you were doing, and then
Yeah.
half of them popped in with a question, and then half of those stayed for coffee or your spinal health workshop or whatever it was, and then half of those became patients, then you're like, oh, okay. So my percentage, my conversion rate might not have been 100%. But when we think of it as actual people looking into this practice, it really does get a lot more real and a lot more exciting there. So I want to ask though, because you have multiple ways that you support chiropractors in doing all of this. Tell us a little bit about if a chiropractor is really fired up right now, how do you help them? How do you serve them? And in particular, tell us about your podcast because it's my favorite.
Uh, that's very sweet that you would say that too. And you have been a guest on there at least a couple of times and probably due for another chat again soon. So, the Marketing and Practice podcast has been a love of mine now for a number of years. I think we're up to nearly episode 400. It's a weekly
Yes.
podcast. We talk about, marketing and practice growth and mindset and all things to do with that. So we have some guests on there sometimes. Often it's me just kind of rambling what's on my mind there as well. And that's probably a really great spot for somebody to start. So that's called the Marketing and Practice podcast. You can head over to anguspike.com if you want to find out a little bit more about what we do. I have a really wonderful group coaching program called Community Influencer, which is helping chiropractors to grow their practice. We have discussions in there based around three major themes. The first theme is all around message and broadcast. And message is clarifying, why should I come and see you? Like, what is different
Hmm.
about you? Not what's better about you, but compared to the other chiropractors in your town, what is different about you? And once you really work at that, and that's often in business terms called a customer value proposition. Once we know that, then it's about broadcasting, it's about telling the world, and it's about finding your right people. The next element that we talk a lot about is conversion and retention. And how do we do this in a heart-centered way that is not based on fear and manipulation, that's not heavily based on having to learn scripts? How do we build relationships with people? You know, I have a mantra that when a new patient came to see me, Jenna, that they were going to be a patient for life. Sometimes they were active, sometimes they were inactive, but we wanted to create a space for them that was safe for them to come to, that they were welcomed, and that they could get to experience chiropractic. So we talk about conversion retention. The last thing that we talk about is systems and leadership. So
Mm.
who do we need to become to run this business that doesn't exhaust us? How do we build culture in amongst our teams so that they can be multiplying the messages that we have out there too? And so that's Community Influencer. If you're interested about finding more of that out, you can find a little bit out on my website there too, or you can send me an email, angus@adiomedia.com, and we can chat there. So I'm sure we can pop those details
Oh,
in the show
absolutely.
notes. Mm.
Yes, I have all of those links ready for the show notes. That is all wonderful. And also, like you said, you've done such a good job of being visible. And I appreciate the congruency of the fact that you are on Instagram, you are on YouTube, you can be found in these places that you have encouraged us to also persevere in. So I will put all of those notes. I thank you so much for sharing today and for just encouraging all of us. Every time I listen to your podcast episodes or we speak, it's always an encouragement to me and an affirmation of, yes, we are doing this and we can do this and we will continue to do this because it has purpose and impact in the world.
Yeah, 100%, Jenna. We change people's lives inside our practice and with the message that we broadcast out to the world. And I just want to remind people that your marketing and these things are not about you. We need to get ourselves out of the way. I'd like to just take a brief opportunity just to thank you too. As chiropractors, we get very excited when we find somebody from outside that loves our profession like we do. And you're one of those very, very special people. And thank you for all that you bring to us and that you help to share with the world as well. So, I really appreciate you for that.
Well, thank you. It is my privilege. I have told people when they said, why chiropractic? And it's sometimes like when chiropractors say, it chose me. And it was very clear when I considered niching down to just working with chiropractors. It was very clear that this was the space that felt so in alignment with me. And so then it's a privilege. And even I took my family all got adjusted yesterday, and even just seeing that moment, seeing the look on my children's faces, the 6-year-old who's giggling through his whole adjustment, my 12-year-old daughter who was like, it's about time. It has been 1 week since I have been checked. I was like, I mean, I think that's pretty good. I got you back here 1 week later, I thought.
Yeah.
My husband getting adjusted, and there was something up in his thoracic region, and our chiropractor was like, oh yeah, right there, is that tender right there? And even my daughter saying, it looks fun to be a chiropractor. And then she followed it up with a joke because it was her dad who was getting adjusted, and she said, because you get to find where it hurts and put your finger on it. And I was like, poor daddy. But just even the car ride home, and I told my husband, it feels like the windows of my brain just got washed.
Yeah, lovely.
Like I can see clearly now.
Yeah.
And that's why I do what I do is I want that for every family. I want that for every friend, for every coworker. I want everyone to experience what it's like to have the windows of your brain washed so you can see clearly, you can think clearly, you can be a little bit more patient, a little bit more kind, a little bit more loving.
Yeah, beautiful message. Thank you for all that you do.
Well, thank you for being here today.
Pleasure.